Good morning. I wanted to talk to you just for a minute about some things that I had noticed, some gaps with the students I had worked with this morning, and those were third and fourth graders. And so a gap that I'm noticing is that our students are not they don't have a solid understanding of what the equal sign means. I know there was a big push for us to teach that a few years ago, but I know that we forget things, or we tend to focus on one area, and if we're not reminded, we forget. So I just want to bring that back to you guys' attention, and then also share with you something that I shared with the students this morning, because they didn't know the language that the equal sign was the same as. That was not automatic out of their mouth. And so even when I suggested that with the problem we were working on, which I'll show you in a minute, it's still, I saw this kind of dazed and confused look. So a visual that I give kids a lot of times is I use a seesaw. And so we talk about on a seesaw, and here's the problem that we were doing. We were doing 3 plus 3 equals what times 3? And so the kids I really wanted them to be able to read this as 3 plus 3 is the same as blank times 3, or blank groups of 3. And it came out that a lot of these students also didn't know you could say groups of instead of the times. So that's another something that we could work on in class. So, or anytime you guys are working on multiplication, or even when you're doing repeated addition, that was something else they didn't seem familiar with. But back to the equal sign. We talked about it being a seesaw. So I drew a seesaw, and we talked about, okay, yeah, some kids were familiar with the seesaw, so I had to kind of survey the students that I was working with, and we talked about what it was, and that someone would sit on this side and someone would sit on this side. There's their handles. Don't make fun of my drawing. And then you would have something in the center for it to be for the pivot point. And so I asked them, I said, if I put myself over here and I put Sam over here, what do you think will happen? And we'll say Sam is a student in the class. And so I said, they of course said, well, Sam's going to go up in the air. And so we discussed why. And we talked about I was heavier. They didn't want to say that, but I said, yeah, I'm fatter than him, right? And we made a joke, and I'm heavier than Sam. So Sam's going to go up, I'm going to go down. But I said, just looking at this, does it look like this should be balanced? And some said yes, some said no. And I said, well, why does it look like it should be balanced? So we decided that, well, you have one person on one side and one on the other, so you would think it was balanced. And I said, right. But the way a seesaw works is based on your weight. So we decided, I said, well, what if I go get, let's say, Julie and Jack and Sarah? All right. And I said, so just by looking, does this look like that this seesaw could balance? And they said, no way. I said, well, what if I tell you that Miss Molesby, she's dreaming, and she only weighs 100 pounds? And that each student over here weighs 25 pounds. And so, of course, some students had to figure out what 25 times 4 was, or just adding them together. That was difficult. And once they figured out that all 4 of the kids equaled 100 pounds, they said, we discovered that, oh, this would balance. And so I said, so we talked about the equal sign basically meaning that both sides, whatever was on each side of the equal sign, it had to create a balance, meaning that the same amount was on either side of the equal sign. So we went back up to our original problem of 3 plus 3 equals blank times 3. And so I said, well, okay, over here on this side on our seesaw, what is the value? And that was another word that some kids were not familiar with. They said, what does value mean? What are you talking about? And I said, the amount, what it's worth. So how much is 3 plus 3? And they said, well, 6. So I said, well, let's write it underneath there. I said, okay, now let's look at this side of the seesaw. Now this was confusing for them because they immediately wanted to write the 6 right there in the blank. And I said, but we've got to figure out how to create or make this value over here 6. So what times 3 would give us the 6? Or how many groups of 3 would we need so that we could have that value or amount of 6? And so some of them needed to work it out, which was fine. and then some of them automatically knew it was 2. We also looked at things, I did things like this. I said, well, what about this? You tell me if this is balanced or not. Okay, so I'm mixing operations. But all this is I'm working on the equal sign. Is this equal? Is 3 plus 3 the same as 7 minus 1? And I made them use the language. I made them read that with me. And I really feel like that helped them a ton with understanding the equal sign. And I think it will help them later even in word problems. And then while they're, I know on the ACT and things, when they have to read those equations, and there's a ton of them, with them having that extra language of the same as, and then with multiplication, groups of, things like that. So I just wanted to put that out there for you, and just please visit that some this year, and just a constant reminder to them that all that equal sign is, it means the same as. It may not look the same on both sides, just like on our seesaw. It may not look like it would balance, but it possibly could, and we have to figure that out. Holler at me if you have any questions or want me to come talk to you more about this. Thanks. Have a great day.